Have you ever felt overwhelmed by grief, by your past hurts and pains, and felt like quitting? You were so overwhelmed you didn't know where to go, and you felt like you're going to stay stuck in the pit of grief forever and ever, and your life will never be full of joy and happiness again. I know many of you have thought that because I used to be there. Well, Bob came to a retreat about 2 years ago. He and his wife had lost their teenage daughter to suicide just a few months before they attended a Spark of Life Grief Recovery Retreat. And we'd really like for you to like this video and to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to hit that bell if you want to be notified of future videos, because we're in this series of heroes of Spark of Life that have taught us something. They taught us to never give up. And so Bob felt overwhelmed. And on that first night when he shared the story with us, he looked me straight in the eye. We had about 16 people at this retreat. He looked me straight in the eye and he said, "I don't care what you say this weekend, David. I don't care what you do. I don't care about the activities you put us through. There is nothing you or anyone else can ever do to give me joy again." Bob was probably in his upper 40s or early 50s. He probably has 25, 30, 35 years left on this planet, and yet he had given up. Have you ever been there? Well, I have been there. I have felt it. I know many of you have felt it. Many of the thousands of people we have dealt with in the last so many years of doing this grief work have been there. They've been deep in the pit of grief and they don't think they'll ever get out of it. So today I want to share with you 3 things that can really propel you out of that pit. 3 things that can help bring grief to its knees. 3 things that I dare you to try, and living a life forward to where you don't debilitate the other important relationships of your life. Here's 3 things. Point number 1 today, and all 3 are crucial. Point number 1, Bob really believed in the power of story. He didn't believe it on Thursday night when he shared his story with us, but you see on Thursday night, other people at that retreat shared their story. We believe at Spark of Life in the power of story. That's why we tell stories. Why is it so powerful? Because if one person can experience devastating loss or losses and go through the depths of despair in their pit of grief and start to crawl out of their pit of grief and to live forward with joy again someday and happiness and purpose, if one person can do it, you can do it. The power of story is in every single workshop and retreat that we do at Spark of Life. We hear other people's stories. I want to share other people's stories because stories give us hope. Because you see, everybody that's come through a Spark of Life retreat, 1,570 of them, and all the thousands that have come to one of our grief workshops that we do, the stories change people. And the reason they change people is because if you can do it, I can do it. If somebody can experience horrific loss and want to give up and somehow turn their anchors to sails, then so can you. And this question is for you and for me as well. What is the difference between somebody who experiences devastating loss and goes to the pit of grief, which is normal and natural, but they stay there for the rest of their lives? They might stay there. They'd never live forward. They exist forward. What is the difference of somebody who stays there and somebody who gets up and does something? Who turns their give up to get up? Well, some people do that. In fact, we see most people do that. So Bob saw other people's story. So that's the very first point of these 3 crucial points, the power of story. So the second vital point this morning is Bob discovered the power of choice. You know, my emotions are very strong when I undergo a devastating loss. You all get that. Emotions can run so deep. And when we lose the dearest on earth to us, when we lose somebody we dearly love, our emotions take over for a while. That's called normal and natural grief. Normalizing grief is kind of the heartbeat of Spark of Life, because I've got to believe that there's nothing wrong with me, that I'm grieving. But I often think something is wrong with me because I feel so weak and I feel helpless. Have you ever been there? You feel helpless and hopeless. And I've said this often, and I'll keep saying it. I'll keep saying it because sometimes we need reinforcement and to remember certain things. That feelings of helplessness and hopelessness does not equate to me being helpless and hopeless. What it means is that's my emotion at the moment. I feel helpless and hopeless. So when death occurs, if it's a death loss or betrayal, maybe it's a non-death loss, maybe somebody you love betrayed you, maybe somebody left you, maybe somebody says they don't love you anymore, maybe somebody hurt you in the past and they've never even said they're sorry. Maybe you have scars from deep wounds of the past. And so sometimes those emotions are so strong and overwhelming, they take control for a while. That's called deep grief. So I've got to acknowledge that, but then I need to acknowledge this, that my feelings and my emotions, though I might not feel as if I can recover, that I can live forward with hope and joy again. Because I feel so lonely or feel so defeated or feel so helpless does not mean I am helpless. In fact, story tells us that others have lived forward with their pain to the extent that their lives are very good right now. They still miss their loved ones. Their pain is still there, but it doesn't debilitate them. They're not ruining other important relationships of their lives. They have not isolated. For a while, we isolate, right? We do that because it's called grief, and it really stinks. But I can make a choice to get up. I can make a choice not to give up. Wanting to give up is different than giving up. Giving up means I never try again. Getting up means I am sick and tired of the give up feeling and give up lurking, and I want to do something. So I get up and I make a choice to recover. My past does not have to define me. And one of the greatest things that I've learned in this grief work is that my feelings of despair do not have to defeat me, and my losses or my failures or other people who have hurt me, those things in the past do not have to define me. In fact, I can reframe what has happened and let it propel me. But for a while, I'm overwhelmed with grief. That's called grief. But then I choose to get up. I choose to do something. I choose to do the next right thing. I do one thing. I choose to do something to get up. I call it get up and wash your face. Give yourself permission to grieve, and in the same breath, permission to get up and do something positive for yourself and for other people. It's a choice I make, not an emotion I feel. And so at this retreat that Bob attended, remember, he had lost a child to suicide. He was devastated, of course he was, when he came to the retreat, but he learned something very powerful. Not only the power of story, but the power of choice. And that leads us to the third and vital point. This is the big one, but the other two have to be there. He learned the power of something called love. Because you see, as I hear other people's stories, my heart goes out to them. Grieving alone all the time is not a good choice, because I'll feel isolated even more than I've ever felt before, and I will tend to give up and quit. And it will hurt other people in my life. It'll hurt other relationships. So when Bob learned the power of love and he heard other people's stories, his heart naturally went out to them. When he was put in a small group of 2 other men in his small group, he heard their stories in more detail. And you can't hear other people's stories, even if you're in pain, and not have something in your heart that wants to help them, wants to give a hug instead of just receiving a hug. I need hugs every day, but sometimes I need to give a hug, right? And the more I give hugs, the more I share in somebody else's life, the more I love, then the quicker I start getting out of that pit of grief. I realize that the pit of grief is not my enemy. I have to go to the pit of grief. Grief sucks. It stinks. I hate it, but it's necessary. And so the pit of grief, though, is not my enemy. We have another video called Embrace Grief. And in that video, we say much the same thing on this point, that grief is not our enemy. And all my grief has to do with love. It's either non-love or love, or love betrayed, or love denied, or maybe love not given, or somebody I love deeply has died. And if the people that should love me, such as my mom or dad, if your dad beat you or left you, or you never knew your parents, or somebody abused you who should have loved you above all else, I know what you think. You think, if they don't love me, who can love me? So I become unlovable, right? But you see, Bob discovered something about love, as we've discovered something about love. The very thing that causes my grief, love or non-love, is the very thing, love, that can propel me out of the pit of grief. The pit of grief is not my enemy, but I don't need to stay there. I don't need to be dominated by it. I need to get up, and I need to choose to live my life forward with my pain and with my grief. And Bob discovered this. He discovered it naturally. For one thing, he was at the retreat because his wife and his son and his son's wife all wanted him to go to this retreat. So Thursday night, he didn't want to be there, but he was there because they wanted him there. Whether he realized it or not Thursday night, he didn't realize it. He was loving them by being there. He was thinking of them instead of himself. So he came, even though he didn't want to come. But then he did something very real. He was honest. He said, I don't want to be here. And there's nothing you can say, David, or you can do in this retreat that's going to give me hope. I am destined to be sad the rest of my life. You've probably been there. I've been there. But he discovered the power of love. And as he heard other stories, his heart reached out to them. 3 things Bob did at this retreat. He found the power of story. I hope Bob's story inspires you to not give up. He found the power of choice. I hope Bob's story inspires you to make a right choice to do the next right thing in your recovery. And Bob discovered the power of love. You know what he and his wife did after they left the retreat? By Sunday at the retreat, Bob's giving everybody a hug. He comes up to me and he says, David, I want you to know that you did not waste your time with me at this retreat. I found hope. Just a little bit of hope. You don't have to have 100,000 pounds of hope today, but you need at least a couple of ounces of hope. Hope that though the past hurt you, those losses will stay with you. They do not have to define you and defeat you for the rest of your life. I'll always have pain. I'll always have an element of grief in losing somebody I deeply loved, or when somebody has hurt me. But that pain and that loss does not have to define the rest of my life. I can learn from it, and I can be propelled to live forward and to love somebody else. So Bob and his wife had us come to their hometown to do a grief workshop. And I think he even paid for my dinner. That's pretty cool, isn't it? He paid for my dinner. He and his wife paid for all the food that was at that retreat. In other words, they helped somebody else find hope. Hope you like this video. Would you please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel? And every week there'll be a new video. At Spark of Life, we want to walk beside you to help you find hope after loss.